we'll do that at the end of this session.
All right. Hope you're still alive there. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to give you two short presentations, one about theory, one about a trial. And the good thing is you have the result of these trials in the bottles that is on the tables. So it's going to be quite interesting. So 3 sessions in one, ending with the tasting session with Jim. So first, let's talk about kettle souring and all different solutions that we have to this date. So here is a classical brewing process. So you go through the brew house, you boil, you cool down, you ferment, you make and then you end up packaging some beers. There are some historical styles. Most of them being from Belgium, one of them being from Germany, that are a bit or even completely different from the classical way of we are brewing, making beer today. So for example, if I have a wort and I don't go through normal cooling system, but I put it in a cool ship like this, it's like a very, very large swimming pool, not very deep, and you leave it there overnight. It cools down, and then on purpose you leave all the doors and the windows open so the natural bacteria and yeast in the surrounding are going to be inoculated in that wort. After that, you put the result of this cooling down in wooden barrels and you let it ferment for 1 to 3 years, and you get lambic. Okay? So it's a very interesting beverage, not easy to drink, very, very, very long to make. And just for the story, I don't buy into this thing floating in the air. I'm pretty sure something goes in, but I'm quite sure that the most amount of ferments, bacteria or yeast, are actually in the wooden barrel. But it doesn't make that much of a difference. Another way to do it is the Berliner Weiss way of making beer. So you make a wort with almost no hop, like it's not bitter at all, and you make a co-inoculation between the bacteria and a Cerevisiae. And you have a co-fermentation that will deliver a very fresh and acidic beer, but not very bitter. You have also my favorite, my personal favorite. So it's a combination, it's in sequence, not in parallel. So what you're going to make is a normal fermentation with Cerevisiae, and when it is finished, the beer is transferred to very, very big wooden barrels that are called foeders, and on the layer, on an inside layer of this wooden foeder, you have acetic acid bacteria. There is a little bit of oxygen going inside through the wood, and in around 6 to 9 months, you get a very acidic beer, which is acetic acid beer, and then you make blends and etc. This would be Flanders red ales, and the most famous example is Rodenbach. Also, last but also not least, this time you make a complete normal fermentation until you reach the bottle fermentation. And in bottle fermentation, you make an addition of Brettanomyces. And so the bottle fermentation is made with Cerevisiae, but the Brettanomyces is going to be still alive, and it will take around 6 months to begin to be perceivable, and then the beer will evolve during a very, very long time. And this is the very, very famous Orval type of beer. So most of these are very, very long to make, and so we need some modern and faster way to produce variation of these beers. So we have in our portfolio 2 bacteria that are able to make kettle souring process. So kettle souring process, I guess I'm not teaching you that much. You recover the wort before adding any hop, make an optional boiling, and then afterwards you inoculate a bacteria let it ferment for 1 to 2 days, and then you boil it again, and this time you add the hop. Of course, you don't add the hop before, because the hop is going to prevent the bacteria from growing, and then you go on with the normal process. So this is a slide I didn't design, so I'm a bit surprised by it, but it's okay. So what we have here, we have the mashing process here to produce the fermentable sugar. We have first the lactic fermentation. So yes, it is a fermentation, it's just a different type of fermentation. And after, you make the alcoholic fermentation, which will bring most of the aromas and the ethanol into the beer. Also some organic acids. So first lactic acid coming from the bacteria and also some aromas, and then the rest. Okay, good. So what we have in our portfolio is 2 different bacteria species. So the first species is a Lactobacillus plantarum. I hear an echo. And basically it's going to use glucose, but in a different way of cerevisium. It's going to make the glycolysis, and then in the end, you see here you have the pyruvate again, and you produce 2 lactic acid molecules. And exactly like in ethanol production, here you need a certain compound that will uptake the electrons from glucose. So basically fermentation is movement of electrons, so you can recover energy, and the last acceptor is here a lactic acid. In a classical alcoholic fermentation, it is ethanol. For the other species, soft sour LB1, which is a Lactobacillus brevis, just before anybody freaks out, we have checked into the DNA of these 2 bacteria. They don't have the genes to resist hop. So you put any amount of hops and they will just die. Okay? Impossible to resist. It uses another metabolic pathway. This was the glycolysis. Here is the phosphoketonase pathway. And for example, the difference here, you see that a molecule of CO2 is already released. And from these molecules, the bacteria can make 2 things. It can make ethanol here, or it can make, that's a bit weird. It's supposed to be acetic acid, and okay, I'll show you that afterwards. So, because it's a bit strange what I saw on the slide. So, the kettle stirring process. What we try to understand is how the different characteristics will affect the kettle stirring process. So what we did is an experiment with pitching rate involved, with extract, the different densities you can have, the different temperatures, and the aerobic conditions, so with or without oxygen. And the outcome of this is we analyzed the acidification kinetics and the production of this organic acid. So we can measure lactic and acetic acid and see how are the levels. So let's have a look at the pitching rate. So of course, when we do that, we have to fix the other conditions. So here we are working in the 12th Plato, so it's 1.52, I think, 30 degrees Celsius and without oxygen. Okay. You will, as always, the LP652 on the left-hand side and LB1 on the right-hand side. So you can compare them to each other. Heads up, LB1 will always be less drop of a pH. So you will have more acidification for LP652 than LB1, as you can see here with the line. Okay, so what we see here is a very, very nice drop in pH. And you can see that the drop is faster and lower when you use more of a pitch rate. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll move around so you can see. So we tested 1, 10, and 100 grams per hectoliter. And don't take me wrong, I'm not telling you to put 100 grams per hectoliter of bacteria. what I'm showing you here is that it takes sometimes. Most likely in your breweries it's going to go faster, but most of the times you will have in the brewery an imperative, okay, I need to start the process at this hour. And if I want to do this, I need to stop the previous one 2 or 3 hours before, okay? If you are in this situation, well, sometimes it would be interesting for you to add a bit more bacteria so you reach the final pH earlier so it matches your timetable, okay? So not saying 100 grams per hectoliter, but if you start at 10 and you can see that, oh, it gets a bit too slow, that's all right. Put 12, 13, 15 until you reach the sweet spot when your timetable is correct, the pH is reached on time, and you can go on with the next brew. So you have something that you can play with, especially with the pitch rate. And then if we look at the organic acid, in gray you will have after 24 hours, and in blue you will have after 48 hours. And you can see here that you have clearly an increase in organic acid in time, and also with the pitch rate. So clearly we have a correlation between the pH being low and the acid being higher with higher dosage. But you can see that you're not going tenfold. At some point you plateau out, you reach the maximum. Okay? So most likely 100 grams per hectoliter was way overpitched. Here with the LB1 we can see that we probably had residual oxygen somewhere because we have also acetic acid, which we don't have here. All right, let's have a look at the wort extract and see what it does. So for the wort extract, you can see that the differences is not that great, but yet we have a difference. And I'd like to point out here because it's very interesting. What we have is here 8 and 12 Plato, and here we have 16. So it means that in this experiment, increasing the wort extract prevented the pH from going too low. Okay, and we'll have a look at why that is. But between 8 and 12, there was absolutely no difference. Let's have a look. I hope, yeah, it's the right slide. Good. So I don't know if you know what is a buffer effect, okay? When you have a buffer solution, is a solution that is difficult to make a shift on, okay? For example, for the pH, it's not easy to shift the pH of a wort. And we can see that here. We are here at 8 Plato and here at 12 Plato, okay? And between the two conditions, we have an increase in 1 gram per liter of lactic acid. Okay, quite significant. It's almost 25% more. But in pH, we have something that is very similar. So what happened? What happens is that the protons that were released during that process, well, because you had more material in the wort, it could uptake these protons, and they are not free. And so you cannot be measured by, so the pH is measuring the amount of protons that you have in the liquid. And if they are uptake into a molecules, well, you just can't measure them. And so you can see here that 1 gram of lactic acid has been, let's say, hidden by the wort. If you go here from 12 to 16 Plato, well, it seems that the bacteria has reached these limits. It's not producing more lactic acid, but you still have more material to uptake those protons, and the pH is a bit higher because you have less protons in the media. It's a clear indication that we have a buffer effect here, and that's how we can explain this. So to remember is that if you have the lowest pH as possible, use a low extract wort, it's going to be easier to reach. So, and here is the organic acid. I've already talked about that, so I'll just move on to the temperature. And temperature is also very, very interesting. Paragraph here. So we have 4 different temperatures, from 30 degrees Celsius to 45 degrees Celsius. So let's have a look. At 45 degrees Celsius, well, we just killed the bacteria. Nothing happened, the pH did not drop at all. Okay? And the more I decrease the temperature, the more the pH is decreased. Why is that? It's because we are going to be closer to the optimal working temperature of the bacteria. And especially for LP652, a bit less for LB1, the bacteria is working its best around 30 degrees Celsius. Here, it doesn't change that much. So let's say that here 30, 37 is the same, here 30 is an optimal, okay? And most likely we didn't make the experiment, but if you go too lower, like 25, the drop is going to be slower. So the sweet spot is really around these temperatures. So overall, if you want to go as fast as possible, drop down the temperature to 30 degrees Celsius and you are good to go. And then for the organic acids, we have the exact same result. So the organic acid is higher when the temperature is lower, and here it's pretty similar with these temperatures, so we're good to go. Okay, last but not least, the presence of oxygen. Should you aerate your wort before kettle souring or not? So here we have, so this line is without oxygen and this line is with oxygen, okay? And you can see that for LP652, it's not changing much except that you reach a higher pH, so lower acidity with oxygen, and without you reach a lower pH. So for LP652, there's no point of aerating because you will just produce less acid. For LB1, we have something a bit strange. Here we have a plateau that is larger with oxygen, and then the decrease to around the same level. So something is going on. Let's have a look. So here we have the results of lactic acid towards this line and acetic acid towards this line. Okay? Here we have the LP652. So the blue one is without oxygen. The yellow one is with oxygen. Here LB1 with oxygen. And in the front, LB1 with oxygen. Okay, this is without, this is with. And we can have also kind of measurement ratio. Okay, we'll see how many molecules of lactic acid do I have compared to how many molecules of acetic acid. So, for LP652, without oxygen, you have 18 times more lactic acid than acetic acid, which pretty much is, well, okay, let's neglect this thing. With oxygen, you decrease the ratio, which means that in this case, we have produced less lactic acid with the oxygen. So again, no point to aerate with LP652. With LB1, we reach 3.8 and 1.6. So it means that actively aerating the wort will bring a ratio of only 1.6 molecules of lactic acid for 1 molecule of acetic acid. So clearly, you have something to play with. If you don't want acetic acid with LB1, you don't aerate. And if you do want, you aerate, and you will completely change the profile of your kettle sour wort and beer. All right, so as a conclusion for this part, we have some common features. The acidification kinetic are quite the same. We have some impact on the wort density, but not that much. And the optimal temperature is 30 to 37 degrees Celsius for both bacteria. LP652 is producing almost exclusively lactic acid, when LB1 is producing significant amounts of acetic acid, especially if you add some oxygen, so if you aerate. And so we wanted to go one step further, and we made a second experiment when we use a kettle sour wort and we ferment it to see what would happen. Okay? So we took a Pils malt base. We made a kettle sour fermentation with these conditions, okay, lactic fermentation, And then when the pH reached 3.5, it was stopped with boiling, and then we made a classical Cerevisier or Pasteurianus fermentation, an alcoholic fermentation. Out of these, we looked at how it went, how fast, the sensory analysis, and also some component analysis like we always do. So let's have a look at typical fermentation performances and what you can expect out of these. So here we have a graph with K97. The dotted line is the wort without lactic fermentation. So it's the normal wort. And the orange and the blue ones here are LP652, the orange one, and LB1 is the blue one. And you can see that pretty much nothing is different. So K97, along with other yeast like SO4, B256, B134, etc., they don't have any problem at pH 3.5. Okay, no problem to achieve the fermentation. What we saw with USO5 is that USO5 was a bit more sensitive to pH. And so we can see that there is a delay in the start of fermentation here, and the fermentation will take a bit longer to reach the end, but you do reach the end of the fermentation. And then last case, which was very strange, so I'll put myself here, for the lagers, you have a big delay in fermentation with soft sour LP652 and not with LB1, for a reason we don't know. And then in terms of fermentation performance and the fermentation, so here you have the fermentation yield. And for example, here we have something that is higher for the wort and a bit lower for the kettle sour, which is completely expected. Huh? Lactic bacteria consume some glucose. So of course, the fermentation yield is going to be lower because you have less glucose to ferment. Okay? So this is completely expected, but overall, the differences is not that high, and just should be taken into account for the final alcohol level. In terms of sensory, what we have in terms of differences, so again in blue LB1 and in orange LP652, the big difference is the acidity level. The acidity perception of LP652 was way higher than with LB1. So again, if we prefer to have really the most acidic beer, better to go with LP652. If you prefer to have something that is more soft, so less strongly acidic, maybe LB1 will be a good fit for you. And overall, the fruitiness level were somewhat comparable. And okay, one thing else happened, it was completely unexpected, is this. So here we have B134, and B134 produces this phenol, the 4-vinyl guaiacol and 4-vinyl phenols. And with LB1, we have the phenolic in the flavor and in the nose also. No problem, you take the beer, okay, I detect those phenols. But with the wort with LP652, nobody could perceive these phenols, which was a bit weird because normally phenols are really easy to detect, but with this bacteria in kettle souring, no phenols. Okay, so completely different sensory profile than without the kettle souring. It's something that we have never experienced before. And so we wanted to make sure that the sensory was accurate. So we went into the lab and we measured the actual compound. So here we have 3 yeast, B134, S33, and T58. Okay? In gray we have the control, and you can see that S33 is indeed POF negative. It does not produce 4-vinyl guaiacol, and B134 and T58 are indeed POF positive. Both control and LB1 sample do produce these compounds. But with LP652, indeed, we are under the threshold. So the threshold here should be around there, 300 ppb. And we are way below, when here we are way above. What does it mean? Well, we'll see that in a second. Just for sure, we wanted to make sure that there was no Brettanomyces contamination, and so it would have been different compounds that I'm going to talk about in another presentation later on this afternoon, but there was no 4-ethyl guaiacol, so no Brett contamination. Oh, okay. I was expecting another slide. So it appears that LP652 is consuming the ferulic acid, the precursor of the 4-vinyl guaiacol. But truth to be told, we don't exactly know what happened, how it happened, and we are investigating that at this very moment. And so the conclusion for the fermentation with the bacteria plus yeast, we have really two different profiles. Safflower LP652 will produce only lactic acid, and along with tropical and citrus flavor. I didn't have time to present that, but the wort was actually very, very, very tropical. And you can expect to have a final pH even a bit lower than this. I would say down to 3.3 it would be possible. And we have a Lactobacillus brevis that is more neutral, but has the advantage to produce lactic acid and ethanol, or lactic acid and acetic acid in the presence of oxygen. And this is it for this part. So if you do have any question, please fire away, because I'm about to present you the trial and the bottles that are in front of you. So I'm open for the question. Yes?
Did you test the presence of any other acids with those two bacteria? We've noticed that sometimes we find the presence of butyric acid if we don't lower the pH pretty wide.
Okay, not to my knowledge, but there was no butyric acid that was detected in all the sensory analysis. So no, I don't have the measurement itself. Maybe it was done, I don't know, because I'm not in charge of these trials, but in the perception there was no butyric acid. Was it with our product or competition product?
Tried everybody's product over the years. I see a lot of cider production.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Other question? All right, so I'll switch quickly presentations. I'll be back with you in a second. Am I okay with that? Okay, good. So, now I'm going to present what is in front of you, and let's discover that together. So we made some non-alcoholic beer, and I'm going to show you a bit, and then we'll have sensory result. Here is your part. Is you're going to make the sensory result of these beers. So what is fine, what is good when you have a pilot brewery is that you can play with it. And what we try to do is to deliver to you the best qualitative technical information, and also we try to see if we can be a bit of innovative. And actually, when you think about it, a non-alcoholic beer most of the time is going to be described as not fresh, as a bit heavy, a bit worty-like. Okay, so we thought, why not combine the kettle souring process and the non-alcoholic beer production to give the best of the both worlds, a low alcoholic beer, but with a high level of freshness and easier to drink. So this is what we did. So you have already seen these pictures of the technical hall and the sensory lab, so I'll just not go around again. So we have a pilot brewery, here it is, and then here is what we did with it. So we made a wort, and half of the wort was directly processed, and half of the wort went through a kettle souring process. And so in this very experiment, we use soft sour LP652 on half of the wort, and then each half was also divided in two, and it was fermented and dry hopped or not. So I'll show you the details just in a moment. So we used 100% Pilsen malt for the base wort. This is just some characteristic to the brew house. We made a classical infusion mashing. Nothing to say really. We aimed for a 12.4 Plato at the end of the boiling. pH was adjusted to 5.1. Boiling time was 60 minutes. That's not that interesting. What is interesting is how we processed before. So out of the 20 hectoliters, we had 10 hectoliters that went straight into fermentation. Okay. The other half, so 5 other hectoliters, were fermented also with self-brew LA01. So self-brew LA01 is a specific yeast. It does not ferment maltose and maltotriose. It only ferments glucose. I realized that it would be good to have a slide about this in this presentation. So pretty much you can expect a fermentation yield of 15%. And if you want to achieve like 0.45, 0.5 beer, you target 6 Plato. What is 6 Plato in density? 1.22 something, yeah, something like that. And you get 0.45% beer. Pretty nice. So half of this half, a quarter, we dry hopped. So we have a, but I don't think we have the dry hop here.
We do, yeah.
Oh, we do? Okay, yeah, we do. So we have one just normal, regular, plain non-alcoholic beer, one that has been dry hopped, and then 10 hectoliters were kettle soured with LP652, and out of that, again, 5 hectoliters were simply fermented with LA01, so we have a NAB sour, or sour NAB, sour non-alcoholic beer.
No, we don't actually, you're right, we don't have the dry hop.
We don't have the dry hop.
Only the sour.
Yeah.
Hop, yeah.
And the 5 other hectoliters were also fermented with LA01, but it was dry hopped. Just one comment about this, because it's really nice to dry hop non-alcoholic beer, but it's also very dangerous. So Gino has talked about hop creep. So when you have hop creep, you can increase the alcohol content by 0.5 or even up to 1. Let's say you have a beautiful 0.45 beer, and then all of a sudden after hop creep is a 1% beer, and you cannot label the same anymore. So it has to be played carefully. So the dry hopped was a cold dry hopped after cold crash, and we pasteurized the bottles. Okay. Here you have some details, but it's not that interesting. And so after the beer treatment, we filtered the beer. So when you filter, you remove the yeast, so it's safer because you don't have the yeast anymore. We made a dilution to reach 0.5. So if you remember, we had a wort at 12 Plato, and we diluted, I think, around 5.5 or 6 Plato to reach the correct alcohol. And right after, we pasteurized the bottles. So here it says tunnel pasteurization, but it was just big buckets of bottles in, and then you put hot water in, and you try to reach 63 degrees Celsius for some minutes, and you achieve here 60 pasteurization unit, which is enough to stabilize the beer. There is no living organism in this beer, or almost nothing at the end, so it's a very, very stable product. So in terms of analytical results, what did we get? Here is the fermentation dynamic. You can see here for the non-kettle soured beer, we're here at 12.4 Plato, and we go down to 10.5, something like that. You can see that fermentation yield is really, really poor, but it's on purpose. We start from 9 Plato to 12.5 Plato. And then here we have the kettle sour ones, and like I said, bacteria has consumed some glucose, so you are lower in gravity, and then you end up a bit lower in gravity, but same amount of alcohol between both beers around. So this is the apparent degree of fermentation. Exactly what, like I said, we reach, in this case, 16%. And just a tiny bit of a difference can make a strong difference. So you can expect to have 13 to 16% attenuation with that yeast. And no matter what, so non-alcoholic beer, hopped non-alcoholic beer, sour non-alcoholic beer, and then all-in-one stuff, non-alcoholic beer, hop and sour. The alcohol level after dilution, okay, not before dilution, after dilution, around 0.4, 0.45. And then in terms of sugar analysis, you can see here that we don't have any glucose residual, and all the rest is pretty much in. Here you can see you have a bit more sugar, it's just the dilution error. So the dilution was slightly different from batch to batch, and you can see that here, and it correlates to here. In terms of pH, this experiment has had the benefit to identify that this yeast does not decrease the pH too much. So we had the same pH in the final beer than after the wort. Than in the wort. And so something also I advise is to decrease the pH very lower, around 4.2, 4.4 before fermentation to get a cleaner fermentation. And then of course with the sour ones we are lower in pH. Something interesting is when you add hop, you just increase the pH again. That can be also taken into account. So from 3.5 to a little bit over 4. And also in terms of organic acid, here is the lactic acid that we added in the wort during the brewhouse process. And here is the extra from the kettle sour process. What else? We have also the bitterness of the beer. These are not very bitter beer. But what we realized, so the thing is, when you have a kettle sour process, normally you have a decrease in efficiency. Here we have the opposite, which is a bit weird. But also we add, with the hop added in cold, we add a little bit of bitterness also. So the bitterness is not the same because of the hop. I was under the impression before that you absolutely need the boiling, but apparently it's not completely needed. And then in terms of vicinal decaton, we have only here the nab hop that is over the threshold. And so even during a very, very short time in cold contact, we can see the effect of the hop creep because we increase the diacetyl content. Okay, so that has to be taken into account. Hop creep can happen even at very low temperature during a dry hopping. Okay, we have to be aware of this. And in terms of beer analysis for the phenols, so SAF Ale LA01 is a positive yeast, but depending on the condition, you will be over or not over the detection threshold. In this case, we are lower than the detection threshold. One word about this, detection threshold is always linked to a specific condition. Okay? Most likely it's coming from a study about lager beer. So you can expect that in ale the threshold should be lower, higher because you have a lot of things to hide. And in a non-alcoholic beer, you can expect the threshold to be lower because you have less to hide. Okay? So on theory, we are behind the threshold, but those that do detect the phenols very well should detect it in the final beer. And what else? You have here the aromatic compounds in terms of higher alcohol and in terms of esters. Well, it's not that completely interesting. We are very low in concentration. And so, just before we taste the beer, or you taste the beer, we also made a sensory analysis of this, and it's a good way for me to present again the sensory lab. So we have a sensory room with 17 boxes, so it means that 17 people can taste in one single session. Overall, we have 50 panelists, and they are in 3 different types of panels. And then we've talked about the colored glass. Here is a picture of the room. And like I said, this is what they are. The panel that tasted that beer is the so-called expert panel. So we have a panel for fermentation flavor. So really like diacetyl, like isoamyl acetate, the banana flavor, etc. We have the so-called expert panel that will taste very specific beers linked to a project. like this. And then we have a third kind of panel that are more specialists in beer style, I think, but I'm not so sure. There you go, and then we are asked to have a consensus on the wording and to have, we are always working with some scales. So if we are asked to detect 4-vinyl glycol, for example, from none to very high, and it's of course very subjective. So thank you for your attention. And do you have any question before I leave you in the very good hands of Jim?
So you say filmed the product or packaging. Do you know what micron that was done to? Did you try and remove all the yeast through filtration, or was it just that?
No, it was Kieselguhr filtration. So yeah, it was not sterile filtration because of the pasteurization process afterwards.
And you said for microstabilization, it was 60 pasteurization units?
Yes.
Is there a source for that? Because the best I could find is the European Brew Convention. It targets 100 pasteurization units for non-alcoholic beverages.
Yeah.
No alcoholic beverages is 60. But once you get to zero, you need to do much more.
So the difficulties I have, I know the book you're talking about is the Manual of Good Practice, but I could never get my hand onto that book.
Yeah,
So
they recommend 120
yeah, but
for zero, but we tested it for our yeast. It's done at 60.
So
if you use a different yeast, you should follow. But then you can go down. Just try it.
the thing is, we have to remember what pasteurization is. Pasteurization is reducing the amount of contaminant inside of a beer, and it will be subjected to parameters. So if you have a beer that is at 0.0, or you have a beer at 12%, the same bacteria will not resist the same amount of pasteurization. Here we are at 0.4, so we are not at 0.0, okay? We are above, and so normally the requirement for low alcoholic beer, which is below 1.2, is around 60. And as Gino said, we have made a trial. I don't have the result here to show you guys, but we contaminated the beer on purpose. So we took some yeast, we hydrated it, and then we put it inside of a non-alcoholic beer made with LA01, and then we pasteurized to see how much we need. And in this experiment, 25, there was plenty of alive yeast, and at 50, there was nothing that was alive anymore. So yes, okay, somewhere around 50 to 100 pasteurization unit, you should be good to go. But especially if you filter before, you have much less microorganisms to remove with pasteurization, so it's much safer.
I just wondered because, well, say a lot of craft breweries now operate in cans, and you can't really get that 120 pasteurization units in cans. 60 really, you can't really go much beyond 60 pasteurization units. Then you're spending so long in a non-pasteurizer.
Mm-hmm. Well, you cannot increase to 64, 65 because of the cans? That's
Yeah,
okay.
There's no pressure in cans means you have a super high residual time in a non-pasteurizer.
Yeah.
Versus
Then the best way is to make microfiltration before and then pasteurize to make sure. Because if you filter at 0.45, normally there is nothing except what could be in the filler, so you just make sure that whatever comes out of the filler is cleaned. So that should be quite easy to make trials and errors. So make a trial like the beer is filtered, it's filled, and then you make different process in your tunnel pasteurization, and directly after you plate the beer to see what is residual, and so you can have your level of pasteurization. Yeah, that should be possible to achieve. All right, sorry about that private discussion. Any other question? No? Okay. Jim, go. Thank you very much. Go. Is that yours?
Yeah, I changed a little bit. presentation, saying that the amino acid is that's literature available.
I don't think I've never tested it, so.
No, but it's generally available that lactose is not.
No, but there was this in the craft drinks, and don't have it at all in the I don't know, there was something weird.
I didn't put that in it.
No.
Jim put it in.
Ah, maybe. But I showed this.
Yeah, you should have it.
Yeah, but I didn't have the ethanol. Yes, there is. No, in the sensory file, you have the right slide. You
go
just
down.
keep on going.
I'm going. No, both yeast produces 3652 to a lesser extent.
I don't think that. I think it's like city.
Okay. Everybody got 2 bottles of beer and 3 cups. If you want to open your beers, so the first one to open, if you look at the top of the crown cap, it just says LA01. This is the problem with people from Belgium say they like
One set.
5 beers.
Everything at the same place.
So yeah, you just want to pour yourself a small measure. And then the same with the second one that says LAO1 LP652. Now just be, oh yeah, so, fine.
You need some assistance?
No, he's away,
Remember to put them out in order so you know which one you're taking. Only got 5 bottles.
Okay, look for them.
You want open it?
No, I need you to pour the beer for them because I only got 5.
That's an offer.
This is what? Okay, you draw. Yeah, we have to.
Back to work, you know? Terrible culture.
So if everyone's bought their beers, does everyone have 3 beers in front of them? Yeah. So working from left to right, if you work your way through the beers, smell the samples, taste, and just make some notes or make some observations. So the first one you're drinking is just LaO1 with the base. So standard wort, normally Pilsner malt, obviously very low Plato wort. Any preference over which one you prefer? Gets better as you go on.
Number 3 is the rest of the bunch.
Does anyone make NAB? Or low alcohol?
Not yet.
Not yet. Is it?
That was tempting. Like, I mean, that's better than a lot that I got.
Yeah. Yeah. The big off-putting thing for me is like residual sweetness and cereal work levels. We can work to beat that, which you tend to see here then works well. And I think Gilles gave me a very good example of like how much sugar's in Coca-Cola, and if you was to try and drink something that hadn't been acidified with that much sugar in it, it would just be undrinkable. And that's why they use the citric acid to balance that flavour. So, flavour descriptors of number 1. What do you guys think? Rubber? Nice. Did we try rubber, that one? Grassy. Yeah.
Sweet.
Like worty and sweet. Like liquid Weetabix.
Very bland.
As an alcohol-free beer, you'd expect it to be lacking in fun. So the second one with the NaO1 and the LP652. I mean, the sweetness has gone, right? Yeah. But you know, it's only the addition of the kettle souring at the start that's done that. So it's amazing how it can mask that sweet flavour.
So what pH did that get to the kettle sour?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you know what pH did that get to with the kettle sour?
3.5.
For the
Yeah, but the dry hopped is going back to 4.
right, 3.5. And then the third one, the dry hop. Definitely can pick up the dry hop on there.
Was it 200 grams per hectare?
Yeah.
Did you say what hops were in it?
Yeah. What, do you know what hop it was?
Citra.
Citra.
So it's Citra.
Always Citra. But I mean, I guess, for me, I would look for something more like pineapple-y, like Idaho 7 or like Brew 1, for instance. I think if you can complement the acidity of the beer with some of those more acidic, citrusy fruits, I think you'd end up. I mean, I don't really like sour beers. Been drinking for so long now, I get really bad heartburn. But I think that actually would be really good if you had almost like a sort of like a pina colada alcohol-free beer. I think it would work really well. So yeah, I mean that's just an example of what we can do with using the different yeast and different bacteria to create different flavours. So in this case, using the LAO1 and the LP652 to create 3 very different beers, but it's quite a novel product and very different from probably what you're all making day to day. So. Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show that we're just at the very start of alcohol-free beers, and I think craft can really push it forward and do what you guys do best, which is experiment and innovate and bring new flavours to the market. So just see it as another opportunity for you guys to, lead the market really, because the big guys are just looking to make alcohol-free lager, which it's been done. So cool. What we're going to take a look at now, this will be the last technical presentation, and then we'll do the last bit of sensory, and then we'll be done.
Yeah, we're on time.
Trying to touch it.
Hi again. So, well, I'm from Belgium. They always ask me to present this. Wonder why. So, Self-Brew BR8. Anybody knows what kind of product it is? Brettanomyces. Okay. So, it is a yeast, just a different species. And then we'll just show you a bit around. Okay. So we'll just have a small look at an introduction, an objective and characteristics. So this is when we design a new product, we have a deliverable list with some topics on it. So we'll have a look at this. We'll spend some time talking about the specific production of Brettanomyces species in terms of aromatics, an applicative study, and then some key learnings for you guys. So let's start with the introduction. Brettanomyces is a yeast, okay? From what we have talked about today in terms of yeast species, is something that is completely different. So you have Saccharomyces cerevisiae, Saccharomyces pastorianus, and here it's Brettanomyces. So the genus is different, okay? So the division between, in the evolution time is way earlier, way earlier, Brettanomyces. Okay? It's a non-conventional yeast, but it has been present in our production facilities forever. Okay? It can be found in wine. There is some wine that are contaminated with this. It used to be everywhere in every breweries before Pasteur discovers yeast, and we try to remove most of the organism to keep only one strain. And it's still in every single lambic brewery, they have Brettanomyces somewhere in the fermentation. Okay? So it has been isolated from a lot of different beverages. I can also mention kombucha, cider. It's a big contaminant of cider. Or sometimes people say, oh, it's a farmhouse cider. Well, it's contaminated with Brettanomyces. It greatly impacts organoleptically. We'll see about that. And today it's more, well, a specificity of craft breweries. Okay, you can take a beer and then you put it into bottle. With or without Brett, you get two different products. So a bit of compound again. I'm sorry, at Fermentis we do like compounds, but they explain a lot. So you have Brettanomyces bruxellensis because it was first isolated in near the city of Brussels, so it took its name with Cerevisier and Pasteurianus. Here we have a very important line, dextrins. So Cerevisier can be either diastaticus or not diastaticus. Okay. If it's considered diastaticus, it will ferment, it will have the ability to get some fermentable sugar out of dextrins. Not all of the Cerevisiae are diastaticus. Well, for Brettanomyces, some are diastaticus and some are not. So it is a very important line, and heads up, we selected one that is not diastaticus, so there is no problem of overflowing. Also, acetic acid production. So there is a minus here for Cerevisiae. It's a kind of a mistake, but made on purpose, because yes, Cerevisiae produces a little bit of acetic acid, but it's really minor, when actually Brettanomyces does produce a significant amount of acetic acid, so it will change the flavor profile, the perception profile of the beer because of the acetic acid. And then volatile phenols, we'll talk about that extensively, but to my knowledge today, all Brettanomyces are positive and produce very, very specific types of phenols. So what were the objectives? Okay, before we started to work, well, first, of course, we wanted Brett. We wanted to have a microorganism that would assimilate everything but dextrins, so glucose, maltose, maltotriose. The last part is important for the bottle fermentation. We directly aimed for a bottle conditioning strain. So the goal of this is to be able to ferment in bottles primarily, is the main goal of this organism. We wanted to have the really typical bread print, good for re-fermentation, of course, and no off-flavor. So if you consider that the phenol of the Brettanomyces are not off-flavor, we didn't want extra off-flavor. For example, we didn't want H2S production or stuff like that. So this is the result of the product. It's not that interesting. So for every single product, we have specification in terms of living matter per gram, and also in terms of contamination. So we do have specs with this product. And two important stuff, you will see that these specs are a bit different from the Cerevisiae because it's two different production process, so we cannot reach exactly the same in terms of outcome. And also one very important comment is that this yeast is produced in Chile. It's not produced in Algis Brüggemann with all the other ones, okay? So the chance to have a Brettanomyces in our product is inexistent because there is no production in the same facility, okay? This is produced in a bakery yeast production facility, and well, you ferment the bread for 2 hours and then you cook it, so you don't have any contamination issues, and we don't have any risk of cross-contamination. So, the interesting part, the aromatic compound production. So we've been talking about these phenols all day, and what is exactly? So we have Saccharomyces cerevisiae that are pop positive, and they will produce what we call 4VG and 4VP, which are two compounds, and the descriptor can be clove, can be medicinal, can be dentist, can be smoky, can be many things, okay? So it's really like, picture yourself like you are in a hospital, you have this very specific smell in a hospital, and that would be the smell of positive yeast. Brettanomyces, they produce ethyl glycol and ethyl phenol. I'll show you after that. And the descriptor are a bit different. It's horse, barnyard, leather, and also smoke. Some also say Band-Aid, you know, what you put when you're injured, a small injury. Okay, so it's very close in terms of compounds, but very different in terms of aromatics. So what does happen? Let's say you have a wort, okay, normal wort, and you ferment it with a Saccharomyces cerevisiae positive. You have the precursor here, okay, and one specific enzyme will produce this set of compounds that are the 4-vinyl glycol. The vinyl group is here, okay, and this is the 4th carbon in the group. And that's why it's 4-vinyl glycol. And it stops there. But if you have Brettanomyces, either from the wort or from that type of beer, it will go one step further. It has 2 enzymatic activities, and you see that the double connection here is reduced to a single connection, and so the name of the compound changes to 4-ethyl glycol and 4-ethyl phenol. Okay, so one change in one connection between 2 carbons, and you get completely different flavors, and that's how nature works. But from wort or from beer, you will get these specific compounds. But that's not it, okay? This is the main signature of Brettanomyces, but you have also other ones. So Saccharomyces cerevisiae will produce mainly acetate esters, you know, banana flavor, and also ethyl acetate. A bit of also another ones. And it will produce less ethyl esters, very, very minor parts. In most Brettanomyces, you do produce these ethyl esters. So the aromatic complexity, the aromatic fruitiness will be different because of using these Brettanomyces. For example, ethyl hexanoate, the red apple, or some other ones that will produce tropical-like flavor, etc. And also, you have here some fatty acids that are present in the wort can be also turned into esters, and these have descriptor like winey or grape-like flavor, which can also be very, very good. So more a complexity in the esters produced by Brettanomyces. And last but not least, so this is also kind of biotransformation. So Gino has presented to you the biotransformation of thiols. Here we are talking about terpenes, and these, if they are linked to a molecule of glucose, they are completely tasteless. But if there is some beta-glucosidase activity, you don't have the glucose anymore, and you get a very high floral-like flavor, like linalool. Linalool is present in almost any deodorant you're going to buy. If you look at the bottle, most of the time you get linalool because it's floral smell, and you can also get this floral perception out of beers that are made with Brettanomyces. Okay, just keep in mind you will have first the horse and the barnyard, very expressive, and then in the background you will have more aromatic complexity. And also I had the idea the other day, but I don't know if it's achievable. What about making a kettle souring process with LP652 and only getting these compounds and not the bread-like flavor? Okay, that would be interesting. I don't know if it's possible, but it's an idea. I didn't mention that. We are the first, and we are the only one in the market that do have a dry Brettanomyces. So Saccharomyces cerevisiae, let's say, is quite easy to dry. Like many people can try to dry it out. If you think about the Kvike in Norway, they dry it by hand. Okay, so it's possible to dry. Brettanomyces is really difficult to dry. Really difficult. It took us many years to be able to achieve this wonderful product. And so the first thing that we did when you had the product in hand is test it to make sure that it would give the result expected. And so what we did is we took 8 different samples and we took a beer that was fermented with a POF negative yeast. 6.3 alcohol, okay, and then in different set of experiments we made bottle fermentation with the bread product to see what would happen and after how long we would get the actual bread print. So here we have the result in flavor unit or other unit, it's the same. For 4EP, 4EG, you can see here there is nothing after 1 month and after 3 months, okay? And so in terms of presence of the compound, after 1 month, we could measure the compound. And this is also went to the so-called expert panel. And after 1 month, we have a response of 0.77. What is it meaning? It's very easy. Let's say that we do this test all together. I would bring you samples, and I would say, well, if you perceive Brettanomyces, you return 1. If you don't perceive Brettanomyces, you return 0, binary. And so when you make the average, we got 77% of positive response. So it means that on average, 77% was detected as containing the bread print, and after 3 months, we had 95%. And you would say, why 95%? Well, it's because we are different, okay? Some people in this room may detect very quickly those phenols, and some may never perceive them. So it's always normal to have in a panel one that is not sensitive to a specific compound. It happens for all the compounds in the world. And so this is just, it must have been one person that did not detect the Brettanomyces print, and everybody else did. And this is just all the experiment compiled, but I'll just show you the results, so there is no point. And here it's also for the sensory data after 1 month and after 3 months. And so to be really exact, it's in 3 different samples that one person did not perceive. So it was just on the edge for him or her to detect. And so in here it was enough, and here it must not have been enough. That's the way it is. But still, the vast majority of the people got the answer and detected the Brettanomyces print. And so the key learnings. So it is a product that is designed specifically for bottle fermentation or cask fermentation. For example, if you make barrel aging and you want to add some bread taste there, it's a great way to have it. So you put it in the barrel and then you add the bread product inside, and it will do the job. We do need to rehydrate that in water, so it's not an easy to use product. Why? Because it's not the same species, so it's more sensitive to dry and to hydration. Refermentation condition, I would personally say from 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, but yes, in barrels at 15 degrees Celsius, you're good to go, and it will produce this 4EP, 4VG host-like after 1 to 3 months, and it will keep evolving in time. One very important characteristics here, I'd like to have one slide dedicated to this, is you have to be careful with the base beer. The base beer should be with a yeast that is able to ferment maltotriose. Why? If you use, for example, S33 or T58, that are maltotriose negative and slow yeast, you will have maltotriose on top of the priming sugar. And if the maltotriose is fermented by Brettanomyces, you will produce more CO2 than you want. And so you will have overfoaming beers. So it's really important not to use those yeasts in the main fermentation. Everything else can be used, SO4, USO5, B134, B256, the lager, why not? It would be a bit weird, but why not? Just those two should be avoided. And if you go to competition, please make sure that you buy yeast that ferments maltotriose. And the storage condition, it's a product that has a 2 years shelf life. And for more than 6 months storage, it should be stored in the fridge. Very simple. And I thank you for your attention again.
Okay. The last bit. And then we're done.
Finish the slides.
Okay, so does everybody have 2 beers in front of them? And you'll have 2 capsules left, yeah? Okay. Then, if you want to take the first capsule, put it in the beer on the left, and the second capsule into the beer on the right. Whilst I get my beer. We should all have 3 beers, but I guess you can all remember what the reference beer was. So once you've done that, you can take the beer on your left with the first capsule, give it a swirl, give it a smell. What do you get on the nose? Anyone? Fennel. Leather? Yeah, leather sticks out for me. Anything else? Frazzles, like bacon frazzles. He's glaring at me. Get behind the microphone. So he needs to invest in a mic. And then, yeah, if you want to go in and taste. So yeah, did anyone get blue cheese, Band-Aid? Definitely get I definitely get smoky bacon. Yeah, like a route beer, yeah, definitely. But the phenolics are quite soft. I mean, I really don't like POF positive beers. I'm not a fan of that medicinal TCP Band-Aid. Smoked whiskies or anything, peated whiskies, it's not my thing. But I always find with this Brett mix, it's really subtle. It's very light. It's not too in your face. Then we can move on to the second beer. So the first one is a representation. So that's early stage Brett. It's the first character that starts to impact the beer. Any thoughts on the second one? Huh? Mushy pineapple. So a lot of that big upfront aromas disappeared. Less smoke, I would say, on the nose, but actually probably more on the taste. Slightly more acidic. Anything else? Anyone picking up anything else? Deck, come on. You're the barrel man. What are you getting? It's got a nose like a beagle.
First one was very much like a very, very young Marval. It was great.
Yeah.
Smoke on the nose. Second one, as someone said there, the smoke started off in the nose. It's the
Yep.
and those eyes, it's like, you could say, just out of like rats. You know, that's sort of natural. Like,
So this is like what we would typically expect from a well-aged Brett, 1 to 2 years. It's mellowed out. The character is a little bit more stable, and those harsh flavours have definitely sort of stabilised and subsided. So, any questions on sensory analysis on any of them that we've done today, or?
I just have a quick question on that, on the strain itself. Did you do a test on the lower threshold for temperature or when it actually starts to work like in all flavours?
Where it stops to develop flavours?
Where, like, because I know you said the optimal temperature is I think 25 degrees. Is there a lower temperature range or you don't see any flavour impact from it? Because obviously the temperatures here, especially in the North West Coast, would be lucky if it's up to summer.
Actually, we know we didn't test it lower in temperature, so we don't know.
You can test for us if you want.
Yes.
Any other questions? So I hope, like with sensory, that you can all take away, and you'll all get these presentations and slides. And so, if you've got any questions now or in the future about sensory, and you want to develop sensory in your brewery and do more, then you know we're happy to help and give you some advice and put you in contact with people. I think it's really beneficial. It's something that I started doing maybe 6 years ago, and it's really fun actually. It's because I think once you start to appreciate how to properly assess beer, it makes going out and having a beer less critical because you can switch it on and off and you know what you're looking for. So, any questions about anything else that we've covered or anything that we didn't cover? Any questions? No? No? No questions?